The tribunal chamber thrummed with a low, eerie resonance, as if the vaulted ceilings themselves were absorbing the weight of history about to be made. It was a room designed for spectacle, golden archways lined with ancient glyphs, solemn statues flanking the perimeter, and above them all, the great mural of the first contact etched in obsidian relief. But today, no ceremony would soften the air. The people gathered here carried war in their voices and silence in their eyes. Commander Darius Vorn stood at the center dais, unmoving. His uniform, a charcoal shadow sewn with metals and edged in gold, carried more gravity than the authority his rank bestowed. His jaw was squared, his gaze sharp, his hands locked behind his back as though any loosening might betray hesitation. He waited, allowing the silence to stretch just long enough to breed discomfort, then stepped forward. The colony on Eos Prime is gone. The words struck like steel dropped on marble, clean, irrefutable, final. A murmur rolled through the chamber's lower tier, where aides and secondary delegates clustered behind the main council. High above, the towering lenses of the observation gallery focused inward, projecting the image of the room to every inhabited system under Earth's jurisdiction. Billions would be watching. Billions who had lost family. Vorn continued. They sent no warning, no demands, no message. Only destruction. At 0340 hours, all telemetry from Eos ceased. Our response team arrived 12 hours later. There were no survivors. At his left, Ambassador Celine Kai shifted in her seat, her hands curling into the sleeves of her white diplomatic robe. Younger than most in the room, she carried a presence that belied her years, deliberate, measured, and not easily shaken. But her eyes, normally tranquil pools of calculation, brimmed now with disbelief. They exterminated 12 million civilians, Vorn said, his voice colder now. Scholars, farmers, children. We don't yet know why, Celine said, standing. There may be a political motive, a mistake, a misfire of diplomacy. No, Ambassador, interrupted Director Leon Vex, leaning forward from his darkened corner of the table. We do know why. Because they could. Because they wanted to see how far we'd let them go. Vex's voice was a quiet thing, yet every syllable carried venom. Unlike Vorn, whose fury burned like an open furnace, Vex's intensity was surgical, cutting, efficient. He represented Earth's intelligence network, a web of whispers and data that stretched across the known galaxy. His black suit bore no insignia, only the steel serpent pin of the Internal Directorate. Celine's jaw tensed. Are we to become butchers in turn, then? Judge and executioner, both. The Korath have already judged us, Vorn said. They found us weak, and they executed sentence. The word Korath hung in the air like poison, a new name to the public, but known to those inside the highest circles. A species unearthed at the edge of the Androus expanse, humanoid in shape, but utterly alien in thought. The first contacts had been neutral, cold, clinical, but not hostile. Until now. A digital chime rang from the center table. The hologram of Admiral Rent from the Mars War Council blinked to life. His projection was crisp, his voice gravel. The military recommends full strategic response. The complete destruction of Korath infrastructure across 5 systems. Operation Phoenix, Ash is already in motion. Celine stepped forward, her voice unwavering. We have not even spoken to them. We have not demanded an explanation or extended a formal inquiry. We must know what provoked this before we retaliate. If we obliterate an entire species without parley, we may wake forces even more dangerous. You believe this is a misunderstanding? Vorn asked, incredulous. 12 million corpses lie beneath a burnt atmosphere. She met his gaze, unflinching. I believe that annihilation without diplomacy is the act of tyrants. Vex interjected smoothly. And if we delay, what message do we send? That Earth mourns, then moves on. We show strength now, or we invite every species watching to test our resolve. A new hologram shimmered beside the Admiral, a transmission from deep space. The room fell silent as static cleared to reveal a figure unlike any human. Tall, skeletal, its skin a pale gray lattice of veined biometal. Its eyes glowed like twin infernos, its voice an electric vibration through the air. We are the Korath. Your colony intruded upon sacred ground. Eos was not a target. It was a correction. You may mourn, but you will not encroach again. The message looped once more, then dissolved. The silence that followed was suffocating. Celine's voice broke it. We can still reach them. There's formality in their language. It implies structure. Law. If there is a code they abide by, then we can work within it. Bourne turned to her. Or be strangled by it. She faced the tribunal, her voice growing steadier. Give me 3 days. Let me go to them. Let me find out if there is a line they will not cross. If there isn't, then your war will be just. But if there is, even a chance, we must try. The council murmured again. Bourne's expression was stone, unreadable. 3 days, he said finally. But no longer. As the chamber adjourned, Celine remained still, her eyes drawn to the mural of first contact above them. Back then, the galaxy had opened with curiosity. Today, it stood poised for war. She left the tribunal behind and descended to the docking bays where her envoy ship awaited. Vex was already there, reviewing orbital trajectories with a surgical precision that left no detail unconsidered. You know they won't listen, he said without looking up. Celine paused. Then I'll be the one who listened. That's where diplomacy begins. He glanced at her, a shadow of something like respect flickering behind his calculating gaze. Just don't get yourself erased trying to save what's already condemned. She boarded the vessel without replying. Back in the tribunal, Bourne remained alone before the central dais. The Korath message repeated silently in the dark. He stared into the cold eyes of the alien envoy and whispered to the silence. If this is the game you want, you've chosen the wrong species. And in the far reaches of space, the countdown to retribution had already begun. The Nemesis chamber was buried beneath Europa's ice, deeper than any official map acknowledged. It was said the project had no name until the first trial run collapsed a dwarf moon into glass. Afterward, the scientists started whispering it, Project Nemesis. Not in pride, but with reverence, and maybe a touch of fear. Commander Vorn stood before the main console, armored in matte black, his gloved fingers dancing across the surface with the ease of a man who had committed every subroutine to memory. Behind him, the engine heart pulsed, 2 fusion cores held in magnetic suspension, surrounded by a lattice of antimatter tubes and gravitic field coils. It looked more like a caged god than a weapon. You're early, said Leon Vex, emerging from the corridor with his usual quiet stride. The intelligence chief was dressed in civilian garb this time, but nothing about him ever felt informal. His presence suggested control. Cold, clinical control. I don't sleep much anymore, Vorn replied without turning. Not since Eos. Vex approached the interface and regarded the weapon with narrowed eyes. If this works as designed, you won't have to. Have the Korath replied? Not a word. Our diplomats reached their moon hall an hour ago. Celine made her appeal. He paused. They laughed. Vorn's jaw tightened. Then it's over. I've already signed the last authorization. Nemesis is yours. Vorn took the tablet Vex extended, pressed his thumb against the verification pad, and exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. In that moment, the burden shifted, no longer potential, now action. He turned to the room's observation port and stared out at the abyss beyond the reinforced glass. A starless void. Fitting. They chose this, he said. They chose not to fear us, Vex corrected. Now we teach them. The launch sequence was transmitted to the dreadnought Indivisible, hidden in high orbit above the Centauri drift. Its hull was coated with refractive polymers and null-field shrouds, invisible to Korath scans. Within it, the Nemesis payload sat like a dormant beast, cradled in a bomb bay that had never seen use, until now. Across the stars, Celine Kai stood in a room of alien marble and bioluminescent pillars, surrounded by towering Korath aristocrats whose expressions never changed. She had spoken for 2 hours, laid out humanity's grief, offered reparation, pleaded for mutual survival. They had listened, with faint interest, as though admiring a child's drawing on the eve of an execution. When she was finished, the central elder, whose name translated only to Speaker of Judgments, dismissed her with a single phrase, "The blood debt remains." She had seen it then, not arrogance, but certainty. The Korath believed they were the superior species. Eos had not been an atrocity. It had been instruction. As her ship lifted from their capital moon, she opened a secured line to Earth. Vex answered. They've made their position clear, she said. I'm sorry, Ambassador. No, you're not. He allowed himself a faint smirk. No, I'm not. She terminated the call. On the Indivisible, final preparations commenced. The captain, an aging veteran named Silva, stood with her hand hovering over the ignition pad. Around her, the bridge buzzed with quiet purpose. No one shouted. Everyone understood the gravity of the moment. Gravimetric shields at maximum, reported an ensign. Core stable. All systems green. Targeting solution locked on Korath primary star. Implosion point calculated. Silva turned toward the main display. The Korath home star, a searing blue giant, pulsed in its steady rhythm. Within hours, it would not exist. This isn't just a weapon, she murmured. It's a warning written in light. Ma'am? The ensign asked. Silva shook her head. Nothing. Begin countdown. On my mark. 10 seconds. 9. 8. At 0, Nemesis was released into space. Silent, featureless, its true complexity masked behind smooth metal and a pulsing energy signature invisible to most sensors. It drifted for precisely 45 minutes, then activated a fold engine that tore a microscopic seam in spacetime. The payload entered Korath space instantaneously. There were no alarms, no alerts. The Korath did not see death until it was already unfolding. The Nemesis device unfolded in 6 stages. First, it seeded the target star with singularity anchors, machines no larger than coins, but each carrying the weight of a collapsed neutron fragment. Then, it detonated an inversion field, reversing the star's outward pressure. Finally, it lit the quantum chain. From the Korath perspective, it began as a flicker, a strange dimming, as though a cosmic shadow had passed over the sun. Then came the pulse. It wasn't light. It was absence. A sphere of pure void expanded outward, devouring everything in its path. Planets boiled into vapor, stations disintegrated into atoms, and ships, both civilian and military, crumbled mid-escape. The Korath homeworld shattered like glass, its continents fragmenting before its moons even registered the event. In less than 3 minutes, an entire star system was gone. On Earth, the transmission played on secure channels. There was no celebration, no applause, only silence. Celine sat alone in her quarters, watching the last moments on a loop. She saw children fleeing into bunkers, elders praying to statues, officers firing weapons into the sky in a final act of defiance. It had been war, yes, but it had also been slaughter. She accessed her comms and tried to send a message to the surviving outer Korath colonies, urging peace. The signal bounced. Nothing answered. Elsewhere, Vorn stood at Europa's edge, staring into the glacial expanse beyond the Nemesis chamber. He said nothing. No speeches. No justifications. Just silence. Vex, meanwhile, reviewed telemetry from neighboring systems. There were anomalies. Strange fluctuations near the periphery of known space. Quantum signatures that did not belong to any known civilization. He bookmarked them. Back on the Indivisible, Captain Silva stared at the black sphere that used to be a star. Her hand trembled just slightly. We erased a sun, she said. A technician near her replied, No, ma'am. We became one. She didn't answer. A single Korath vessel, heavily damaged, escaped the implosion radius. A scout frigate. Its lone occupant, a young pilot barely of age, recorded what remained of their home system before entering deep space. As the ship vanished into the stars, a single message looped through its emergency beacon. You have taught us fear. We will teach you patience. It was intercepted days later by a listening post at the edge of the Arcturus Reach. Vex received the transcript first. He smiled faintly. So they can learn. He filed the message. Then he locked it behind 4 encryption walls and said nothing to the public. Above Europa, a new relay station was being constructed, one capable of deep space scanning and gravitational anomaly tracking. Earth had won, but the universe had noticed, and it was listening. The silence in the aftermath of the Korath system's obliteration was not peace, it was calculation. Earth's coalition governments had hoped for relief, for quiet. Instead, they faced a haunting, pervasive stillness in the void, as if the universe itself had drawn a breath and held it. Commander Vorn was summoned back to orbital command within the week. The Europa chamber had been placed under lockdown, its schematics sealed behind 12 fail-safes. On approach to Earth, Vorn watched the blue marble swell beneath him. It looked unchanged. That illusion was more unsettling than comfort. Celine Kai waited in the debriefing chamber, its walls opaque, every surface made to dissuade distraction. She stood when he entered, but there was no warmth in her greeting. "You've seen the report?" she asked. He nodded once. "The beacon transmission. I read the original Korith." She leaned against the table, arms crossed. "Then you know what it implies. That there are survivors. That they're regrouping. And that they intend to return." Celine studied him. His eyes were hollow, not from lack of conviction, but from certainty. He'd already played out their next moves, and hers. "This wasn't supposed to be your burden alone, Vorn. Burden comes with action. You made the appeal. I pulled the trigger." And Vex loaded the weapon. Her voice tightened. "He's disappeared, you know. Last seen boarding a ship bound for Proxima 6. Unscheduled. Unregistered. Do you think he knew?" Vorn asked. "I think he knows more than any of us. About the Korith. About Nemesis. About what else might be watching." Vorn didn't reply. Celine sighed, then pushed a data slate toward him. "Read it." He skimmed the contents, eyes narrowing. Deep-range telescopes had detected artificial structures beyond the outer rim, beyond even the old Prothean expanse. Massive constructs orbiting a black hole. Emissions that pulsed with regularity. Not a civilization, perhaps, but something organized. "They weren't Korith?" he asked. "No." She tapped the last image, blurry, distorted by distance and radiation. It showed an angular shape, too symmetrical for natural origin, its surface webbed with energy conduits. The Korith didn't make this, but the signal from their escaped scout was routed through this region. Someone received their warning. Celine's jaw tightened. "And now they're watching us." He leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "Then the question becomes, what do we do when they knock?" She didn't answer. In low orbit, the Indivisible returned from drydock, its systems upgraded, and its crew rotated. Captain Silva had not requested to remain, but her orders had been reinstated. She walked the corridors with a quiet purpose, acknowledging nods, avoiding questions. In the weapons bay, engineers now called the Nemesis device a Sun Spear. It wasn't a name authorized by the military, but it caught on. Even the junior officers whispered it with a blend of awe and dread. Silva stood before the empty housing where the original payload had rested. A new prototype was underway, faster, more precise. She knew that meant it would be used again. Soon. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Gray, approached with a datasheet. Long-range scans picked up something unusual along the edge of the Tarsus drift. Define unusual. An energy wake. Like a slipstream, but inverted. Something entered normal space without a drive signature. Silva didn't move. "Show me." The readout was stark, space-time distortions, followed by a brief electromagnetic burst and a sudden, unnatural cold spot, 10,000 kilometers wide. "Are we tracking it?" she asked. "We tried." It vanished again 6 minutes later. No trace. No radiation trail. Just gone. Alert Earth Command. And recall all forward probes near Tarsus. Gray hesitated. "Do you think it's them?" Silva didn't answer, but she was already walking to the bridge. Elsewhere, far from Earth's known borders, a vessel moved silently through warped dimensions. Its crew were not human, not Korith. Their form was obscured by integrated environment suits, part organic, part metal, their faces hidden beneath reflective veils. One of them stood before a holographic image of the Nemesis detonation. The playback paused on the moment the Korith sun imploded. It spoke in a voice like distant thunder. Capable, crude, driven by fear. Another replied, "Fear is efficient. It escalates evolution. Their fire burns brighter than expected. We must see how far it spreads." A third figure adjusted the image, replacing it with a star map. One system erased. Another braced for war. The pattern accelerates. The first raised a hand. Then the watch is no longer enough. "Initiate contact." The others bowed their heads. Back on Earth, the Council of Eight convened in shadows and whispered urgency. Civilian morale was eroding. Questions were mounting. Some demanded justice. Others demanded accountability. "Celine," one counselor said, "do you believe peace is still possible?" She met their gaze evenly. "With the Korith? No. That window is closed. But with what comes next, we don't know. Yet. Then we prepare," the chairman declared. "No," she said. "We listen. We must not become the threat we just silenced." In the room's silence, Vorn stood at the window, overlooking a blue sky that had once seemed safe. He thought of the Eos colony, its children, its cities. He thought of the Korath, proud and unbending, now dust. And he thought of the cold signal beyond the rim. "They'll come," he said softly. "And we'll have to decide. Are we architects of survival or authors of extinction?" No one replied. But deep in Earth's vaults, the next generation of Nemesis cores pulsed quietly, awaiting command. Far above, in the quiet beyond the stars, new eyes opened.